And on the panel here are another three felons of our land. Jackie McMullan, to my right, Colm Scullion, tucking in his stomach in the middle, and a man who wanted to sell his book here tonight instead of Gino's, 6,000 days, which represents 17 years in jail, 16 years in jail, 17 years in jail. I mean, that is some like the time. So I'm going to begin in chronological order because we're going to talk about their lives, their prison experiences, their comrades, but especially concentrating on the three Belfast hunger strikers who lost their lives in 1981 because they were all very close friends and comrades, and some of them served in a cell with some of those lads. So I'm going to begin with Colm. Colm is never fails to tell you that he's from Balahi in South Derry.
I'm afraid you're wrong, Danny. I'm from Scullion.
Yeah, they actually
get it right, Danny.
Colm in one of his bios claims that the Scullions have lived in that area for thousands of years, even before they landed in Ireland. He's claiming that they landed over here.
That's why the Morrisons were living in England.
Sorry, get it right. We were Scottish Presbyterians, not English. So, Colm, you grew up in Ballyscullion.
Yes.
And, I mean, an area, a very small area that produced quite a lot of very active service Republicans, Dominic McGlinchey, Tom McAwee, and Francis Hughes. I mean, did you know those lads when you were growing up?
Yeah, we all went to school together. Frank Hughes was a bit older than me at school. Tom McAwee was a year older. Ian Milne, I had missed Ian. We all went together. Dominic McGlinchey, all within a mile of each other. So that, traditionally was quite a Republican area, even go back to the Fenian period, 1798. There was a strong,
yeah, I'll come to that in a second.
Yeah, there was a strong nationalist Republican area. Yeah.
And what was life like living? I mean, most of us are city slickers, and no time for you country puppets. Anyway, so, I mean, growing up there,
we had I have to say, we had a simple lifestyle, but it was fantastic. We had a very cultured lifestyle, agricultured as well as cultured. But no, most of us had jobs on farms. The first job I had was in Thompson's farm. Thompson's farm was about a mile away from me, and I walked over the fields to work there after school. The week's wages was £1.10. Most people in here don't know what 10 shillings is, but I was feeding a couple of hundred pigs. The Thompsons they were a good family. Willie was an old man in my eyes then, and he lived with his even older mother. I thought she was about 200 years of age. She would have scared you, this wee grey-haired woman. She was bent over in two. She had a long grey beard. All she talked about was the Western Front. Yeah, the First World. All her friends had went to the First World War, and she didn't know who. Like, she was in her modern day. Well, we'd call her. Say she was doting, but she knew that we were Scullions from Ballyscullion and Ballymaccombs. But our family were renowned as potting makers, and their family nickname was the Butlermen Scullions, because that many families of Scullions all had different nicknames. And she would say the same thing every evening for about 5 years. She says, "Do you live near the Butlermen Scullions?" And I didn't want to let wise. I live up the road from them. I was a Midland sort of a crowd. She says, "They tell me the mother hunts them out of school with bellies full of potty to keep them warm." So that was like, what a good
see, I mean, across the north, different areas did at the start of the conflict at different times. So, for example, I mean, certainly, well, at Derry, Duke Street, 5th of October. Here, certainly the pogroms. I'm talking about the immediate consciousness and perception of conflict. I mean, was there much sectarianism in your area? I mean, how did you feel about things that were happening in Derry or Belfast? So basically, when do you date your conscious of there something being wrong with this society and something needed corrected?
Well, the first real experience was we had cousins living in Ardoyne, Mulholland's. Grace Mulholland was Grace Scullion, my daddy's sister. Daddy had to go to Ardoyne and pick them out. They were facing the Crumlin Road, and the house was shot up. And Becky actually knew them. One of them was a volunteer. He since died. So we had to go and get them home, and they come back to South Derry. They eventually went to England and then come back again and they're all living around North Belfast now. But we were, as Wayans, we were taken out to the civil rights protest. I remember going to Balahi, Devlin, standing on a wooden box, and Balahi was, I'm sure there's a couple of thousand people out listening to her.
I think the Burntollet March went through Balahi or Stoplin Dulladove.
All come through it. All the families, most of the families, Republican families, would have been all involved in the civil rights. But personally speaking, a benchmark in my life would have been overhearing a conversation that I wasn't supposed to hear. And we lived in a wee tin-roofed house. There was no toilet in it, cold water, and that was it. And we were sent to bed early. There was a lot of men in the house, and there was a meeting taking place at night, and there was probably one or two round men there, but they were setting up a local defence group, and they were doing a count on what weapons they can get in the area. It was all legally held shotguns. And I remember at that time, I remember putting my ear to the door and hearing my dad saying something about, well, we can put sandbags up to the windows. They were expecting the Lloyds then to come in and attack the houses. And I heard then in recent years that the Lloyds had planned that, but whatever IRA, or well, there wasn't a lot of IRA in the area, it was more of an independent group, they had come and protected the whole area. And that was about 69, 70.
And then just down the road from you, Sean Brown was.
And Sean Brown was well, Sean Brown's home place is just down below from us. Who was murdered there recently. There was a lot of big Protestant farmers, and most of them were okay, but they were in the Orange Order, they were keeping an eye on us, keeping an eye on them, sort of thing. You just didn't know.
And the march through Balahi.
March through Balahi, that was going on, the anti-internment marches. But as time progressed, everybody took their sides, the locals then were joining. What used to be in the B-men, then in the UDR, your neighbours were in the UDR.
So at 17, you joined O'Green Ahern, the Irish Republican Army, and you're out on an operation one day with Thomas McElwee and Danny McElwee and Sean Peake.
Sean Peake.
And you're travelling in a car with explosives, and the bomb goes off prematurely.
Yeah.
And you're severely injured, you lose muscle and several toes. I think Tom loses an eye.
Yeah.
Tell us about that afternoon, because of course Thomas McElwee has been associated with the killing of a woman who died in an explosion that day, and he wasn't involved in it at all.
No, we were caught an hour before it. And I had this conversation with people. It was about time that we took legal action to clear Thomas's name. We were caught 1 hour before it, relying on the hospital. But that you know, we weren't there. But that morning of the bomb attack, there was 3 carloads of us. At that time, there was different towns were being bombed locally. Right up to the north coast, Port Russian, and we're getting blitzed. So we were undoing Ballymena. Ballymoney was being attacked the same day. But we left in 3 car loads from South Derry. We had done a dummy run the week before it. We knew where we were all going. So Tom was the driver, Benny McCullough was beside him. I was behind Tom, and Sean Peake was beside me. And we had come into the Fairhill, where the shopping centre is now. It was a big open market and a cattle market. And we drove in there, and I remember the windows of the car were all steamed up. And I remember looking out and seeing a neighbour of ours. And I said, fuck, hope she doesn't see us. And we pulled into the car park. Tom then, he started priming the bombs. And the only thing I can describe it as is in slow motion. Tom turned around and he was looking at the back of the car, and he lifted the bomb, primed it. He turned around again and set it, just set it down between me and Sean. I had a bomb between my legs here. Sean had another bomb, and there's another one in the front. And in slow motion, I remember looking at Tom and the bomb, and I turned around like that, and then there was, I don't know if the flash come first or the bang, but I felt myself getting hit, and I smelt the smell of petrol. So the bomb had exploded. I got a gallon of petrol over me. I started to smoke, and I realised then there's another bomb between my legs, and I embraced myself. And I think it's one of the very few times in my life I prayed. I remember blessing myself, and went, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, have mercy on my soul. And it was written just to get blown up. And it was a 2-door car, and I used to joke about, no, it's maybe not the right time to joke, but I used to say, if ever you go bombing, make sure it's a 4-door car, not a 2-door car. But I couldn't get the seat forward. And all of a sudden, I got out, and my foot was blown around back to front, and the trousers were hanging in bits. Where my toes were at, the blood was coming out in the rhythm of my heartbeat. Boom, 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 boom. And Thomas McElwee, God love him, was standing, his eye was split open. I turned around, and Sean Peake was lying behind me, out beside the car. and his leg was hanging off. And the first thing I struck to myself was I looked down, I could see the injuries, blood coming everywhere. I could smell the petrol, and I knew I had to get away from the car as soon as possible before the car got up. And I got down through the car park, the next thing there was cops and machine guns and stuff. And the whole place was pandemic. They didn't know if we were volunteers or civilians. I lay on the ground and I started to float. I started to sleep. And this man was biting the face off me. He says, don't be sleeping, don't be sleeping. And he put a turk in my leg. And I just remember being carried into the ambulance. One of the targets that we were going to bomb was a fashion shop in Ballymena. And I had bought a new leather jacket out of it on the dummy run. I didn't wait on the sale. But I knew there was going to be a bomb damage sale coming up. But I remember going to the back of the ambulance.
So
And the paramedic was cutting my new jacket off.
So you're eventually, I mean, after you're recovered in hospital, you're all brought to the Crumlin Road Jail. You're on remand. It's 1976.
Yeah.
76. And is that where you first come across Bobby Sands?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I went until we were taken to Musgrave Park Hospital, and the first person I met there was Hector McNeil, the famous Hector. Hector used to say...
Is Hector here tonight?
No, Hector's actually in holidays in Carnlough. I double checked that because of a story about him. I wasn't sure he wasn't here. But Hector used to say to me, Scullion, he says, tell everybody who's the first Belfast man you met. And I said, Hector, you're using the word man very loosely. He says, you're the first Belfast person I met, not man. But we're taken from there. Me and Hector, we came through the whole thing from day one up until now. And even I phoned him the other night, you know, we phoned each other all the time. So from the Crumlin Road, or from Musgrave then, I went to get skin grafting done. I was handcuffed in a wheelchair. The cops were taking me to the theatre. They took me into the side room and they fucking bit the head off me before getting an operation done. And that actually was funny, and it wasn't funny at the time, because they took me to the reception area and I started to shout at everybody, these bastards are beating me up. And then they were running all the harder with a wheelchair. I was tied on it. But from there on, me and Hector then were taken down to the Crum. We ended up in the...
Because Hector was shot as well.
Hector was shot in the leg, yeah. And we were in the beds beside each other. And tell you what, he made time so much easier for me. It just was that funny, you know.
Clearly you don't know him.
Sorry?
Clearly you don't know him.
But we're taken from there, prison hospital in the Crum, and then into A-Wing. And the two of us from A-Wing. And then I was put in the cell with Jimmy Burns, who Jimmy really, really looked after me. And so when I went into A-Wing, then I was looking around to see if I could see anybody else, Big Tom or any of the lads. But it was during this time that Bobby come to just do the debriefing. Bobby and Joe McDonnell was there, and I can't remember who else. So I met Bobby then, went through the whole rigmarole, the debriefing and stuff. And a few weeks later, we were talking about it earlier on, myself and Jimmy were in the cell, and Jimmy was OC, and our cell was about halfway up the wing, and this was during the fight for segregation, which was very, very brutal and very dangerous in the Crum. And the screws come to our cell. They'd let a couple of hoods out first, but they come to me in Jimmy's cell and let us out, but we didn't know they had already let the loyalists out. We walked into the canteen and it was full of loyalists. And I remember I was just looking at each other, and I was in two crutches. And next thing there was a share of steel trays come up into the air.
I hope you get stuck into them.
Here, it was like, you used to see the Belfast Marathon Sunday. But no, we just, I couldn't run. Well, actually, Jimmy got to get before me. We got to
Squealer.
I remember Jimmy got to the gate and he tried to pull me through it. I was a screw by the name of Moore. He was the one that set us up. And I got jammed halfway in the gate. And the lawyers, they fought each other to get at me. And they were, luckily they hadn't got knives, but they were beating me with everything they could get their hands on. So I was dragged out, up into the cell, and then they sent for the paddy wagon. But in the meantime, Bobby was up on the threes. And I think Fran McCann was there in Levy, and all them boys. There was 28 Carrickfergus men charged with killing someone, and they were all at court. And Bobby knew if the 28 Carrickfergus men come back, they'd be in the majority. So they attacked the loyalists before the 28 Carrickfergus men come back.
Oh, right.
So Bobby busted his fist, and Bobby and I both ended up in the Mater Hospital. And I was getting my legs until, and Bobby, he had his fist all bandaged.
So later on, you're sentenced to the Secretary of State's pleasure,
Yeah.
which is probably equivalent of a life sentence.
I was too young to give a life sentence
Life sentence.
for murder.
And you end up in the blocks, you go on the blanket. And at what stage does your path cross with Bobby again?
Well, Bobby and Big, who else? Big Tom. There's a few moved down into their block. We were in H3, and I know people are tired of me saying this. You know, the 3 blocks, 3, 4, and 5, they're all bad, but 3 was on a league of its own for brutality. And I think one of the reasons was because we were the youngest prisoners. Like Patter Whelan, the photographer's on about there. Patter was across the wing from me. But Bobby had come down, and the dark accused, they all come down into their wing. Did you come that time, Blood? Yeah. Blood was there as well. Although we didn't know what this man looked like, but he never would leave the cell. But they come down that stage, and like I done that wee podcast during the week, and what I said on it was, there was a shocking air of depression. It really was. Nobody was even talking. There was no sing-songs, no nothing. It was really, really bad. And I remember the dark getting up to the door, and he just asked different prisoners what happened to you and what happened to you. And they were shocked at what was going on, even though they were coming from a block that there was brutality in. So Bobby and the Darkened boys come into this atmosphere, and that it was then they knew that this has to break somewhere. So
was that part of the impetus behind the decision?
Yeah, of course it was the brutality, seeing what was going on. You know, there was broken bones and stuff in our wing. You know, and so everybody's aware of what was happening, but it was just shocking.
But you ended up in the cell with Bobby.
I ended up in the cell with him.
You told Bobby the story of McElhatton. You told Bobby the story of Roddy McCorley, which he later he writes brilliant poems about.
Yeah, well, actually, I didn't tell him the story about McElhatton. That was Malky Carey from Lougheed. But I told him different stories, and they're all true, by the way, Danny.
Oh, yeah.
But I told him the story of Roddy McCorley, and then he sat down and he wrote me the poem, Roddy McCorley, and he gave me a wee mention in the poem. So that part is...
Were you from Balahi or Ballyscullion in the poem?
Ballyscullion, Danny, Ballyscullion. Like, I think the Morrisons were yeomen in the poem, you know. But no, he mentions myself and my father, we used to poach for salmon and eels in Loch Beg and River Ban. My daddy, they called him the poacher around home. So Bobby, he writes in the poem, "'Twas at Cross Keys the pikes gleamed white, neath the telling yellow moon, as the common folk, and there led the poacher's son went out to meet their doom." And that was Bobby's way of thanking you for just the way he worked. So he put that in the poem, and I remember that he read it out the poem, but he called Big Tom McElwee up to the door. Tom being from near Ballyscullion, Balahi, and he read it out to all the men that night. But I got it, and I smuggled it out to my mum, and then later years I gave it to you to donate to the trust, and went to Dublin. But so he wrote that for me. He was writing quite a lot. There was other poems and stuff that never reached the outside. And I know he done one about the famine that never made the outside. And he was getting children's nursery rhymes, and he's putting them into, not translate them into Gaelic, but putting Irish words to them. And there's one, I used to go, "Vie she jazz, vie she yog, August tor she pogue," and with your knick-knack, paddywhack, that one there. And I don't know if anybody knows, but Bobby, like, and that's what he was at, doing, you know, stuff like that there. But he was continuously writing. I'm trying to think other stuff that
you and Christy Moore have done something on one of Bobby's poems, haven't you?
Yeah, I met Christy many years ago. He came down to Balahi. He was playing a gig, and I had a stall up for Sinn Féin selling books and stuff, and he came down, he was getting gear, and I asked him to sing the ballad of Tim Evans. And he said, "Nobody ever asked me for that." I said, "Where did you hear that at?" I said, "Well, I heard it from Bobby Sands, but he said he heard you sing it, and I think it was the Ulster Hall or somewhere." And then he was intrigued, and then he ended up, he stayed in our house that night. So I had a wee box with the songs and stuff in it, and I gave it to him. But just on that, when I'm thinking about Bobby doing all the writing, most of us boys have been into the 70s music, like the glam rock stuff and a bit of Led Zeppelin, the whole thing. Bobby's into singer-songwriter stuff. And he used to sing this song to me, and I could never, well, he sung to everybody in the wing, but I could never remember the name of it. But I knew it was written by Loudon Wainwright. And then when I got out, and in recent years I've got computers and stuff, I said, right, I must just Google this. And I would say to Bobby, sing that song about the man whose dog that run over and the wife run away and all this stuff, right? I couldn't remember the name of it.
It's called Country and Western.
But Danny, anyway, I googled it and I done the research and I found, I knew it had to be in around 76, 75, and I found the album, and the song was called "The Man Who Couldn't Cry" by Loudon Wainwright. So, like, no one of us never heard tell of Loudon Wainwright. So he was singing all this singer-songwriter stuff. So it was, fresh stuff coming into the wing.
I mean, you were still in the jail in 1981. Mm-hmm. You were there for the 10 deaths. Were you?
Yeah.
I mean, what sort of an impact has it had on your subsequent life?
It's hard to describe that. Very sad. I done that podcast on Wednesday night with Sean Murray. I couldn't sleep on Wednesday night. I was fit for nothing yesterday. It just hit me big time. It's just, you want to forget about things, but you feel guilty if you're forgetting about it. It feels as if you're letting people down. It's always there. Mm-hmm. And then you try to push it to your back of your mind for a good reason. But it's something that just doesn't go away, Especially big Tom McElwee. Went to school with him, and my last conversation, Tom McElwee was down the wing from us, and he come up to my door for the last conversation, and that was tough. And he knew he was heading to prison or hospital. He wasn't coming back again. So I often think about wee situations like that there.
Okay, Colm Scullion, thank you very much. Thank you. So it's now the turn of 6,000 days, Jazz McCann. £13. So Jazz, you grew up in Belfast and you were a grammar school boy, St Malachy's. Not hardly the stereotype of the Republican working class, And I mean, there's a very poignant moment in your book because you're now in, I think it's in Sea Wing, overlooking St Malachy's yard, looking down at a kid who's looking up at you, and you're reflecting on your past and on your life. So could you tell me a bit about, I know you were led astray by one of the Livingstones who got you life imprisonment. Yeah. So tell us about that and your prison experiences.
Yes, I went to St Malachy's, and I used to look into the jail because I always had a feeling I was going to end up there. Because I was a Republican, I would have been in the Fianna at the time when I was at St Malachy's, and you'd have been taking days off school, do funerals and so on, Guard of Honour, all those things. So I knew some of the people, obviously, who were in Crumlin jail, and I knew I would end up there one day. So it was quite ironic when, a few years later, I'm in Sea Wing, and you're looking across, and you hear the bells, and that's them going for lunch, that's them going for break, that's, what way it's broke up. And you sort of say to yourself, that'd be all right. You always knew you'd bloody well end up here,
You should have joined the SDLP.
I should have, or even the Alliance, yes, I should have. No, but I was always a Republican. I also went to Holy Child. And I have to say, I'll always remember this, on the 50th anniversary of the 1916 Rising, the school, I would say probably Key Stage 2, did a project on 1916. And apparently the vice principal, I think you called him McKeith, he was notorious because apparently he walked in the funeral of Terence McSweeney. So we did a big project. I could have named you all those who were executed. I could have near enough recited the proclamation. And then we did a trip down to Dublin, Kilmainham Jail, Arbour Hill, and so on. And then whenever we were playing in the yard, it wasn't Cowboys and Indians, it was Treaty 8s and anti-Treaty 8s. And, you wanted to join the IRA, basically. And just to follow up on that as well, on the 100th anniversary, 1916, I brought a class down, I brought the P7s out of St Joseph's down to Dublin, and we did the same thing, Kilmainham Jail, Arbour Hill, went round the college bank. So that was good. So hopefully we planted some seeds there too. It certainly did it with me.
So you're arrested, you're in the Crum. Just wanted to ask you, is it 76 or 77?
76.
76.
Just missed political status by a couple of months.
Yeah.
Just so lucky.
So was there much discussion about what strategy you were going to adopt? Because I remember Leo Green speaking at a meeting, and Leo, who was also on remand at that time, said that they had no plans. They had You know, it was almost
Exactly.
as if it was
We
almost
had
as if
no idea.
the Brits will realise within a
It
few
was
weeks that this is a
so
mistake.
strange. It was so
You know?
strange. Crumlin Road, A wing was the political status wing for Republicans, and they moved us into C wing. And in C wing, there was also loyalists there, so there was a lot of tension between ourselves and the loyalists. And then it did blow up on the 12th of July, and then they locked themselves up, so we had to run the yard. But that only lasted a while. But then the move, C wing there was too many in C wing. It was busting at the seams. And then what they had to do, they moved some of us into A wing. And also in A wing, there were still some political prisoners as well because they were coming down for trial. So people who were in the IRA with the same company did the same things. They had political status, whereas we didn't have political status. But as far as what we were going to do, we hadn't an iota what to do. We didn't know what was in front of us. We used to hold meetings in the yards and what we were going to do, and there was only one thing ever said: we will not wear that prison gear. Absolutely not. We will not do prison work. What that entailed, we had no idea, and I'm glad I didn't know because it was a bloody nightmare in the end up. Thank God I didn't know, but there was no way we were going to do that, and that was it. So it was basically left to your own devices, and the first person to get up obviously was Kieran Nugent. Hunger strike did come up. It did come up. I'll always remember at a big meeting in the yard, and we were saying, what are we going to do? And somebody said hunger strike, but it was totally dismissed. But I have to say, throughout my time in imprisonment during the blanket protest, it was always there in the background. It was always there. And what we did everything that was possible, everything that a prisoner could do to try and prevent that. We went to extremes to prevent that because we didn't want hunger strike, because we knew if there was going to be a hunger strike, people would have to die. And that's why the protest lasted so long. We're talking 5 years here under horrible conditions, doing things which was absolutely terrible, having to suffer all sorts of endurance that the screws were throwing at us. But we did it, first of all, because we were never given in. We were never, as I said, going to be criminalised, and also because we didn't want hunger strike. We didn't want anyone to die.
So you're sentenced to 25 years?
25 years, yes.
25 years. You're on the blanket, and I mean, presumably you meet a lot of countrymen. I know you're shouting out the door, and you might meet each other at mass.
Yeah.
But I mean, your book 6,000 Days is just incredible tribute to Joe McDonnell.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just Joe just comes off the pages, and you get a sense of his ambitiousness, his mischievousness, and also the fact that he's only, although Joe's only like at this stage 26, and I think he's 30 when he dies on hunger strike. But those few years difference between you younger people and Joe makes him like a man.
That's exactly. He felt like a man, exactly. And he was also sort of like a veteran because he had been interned twice. He was on the Maidstone. He was in the cages. Obviously, he was in Crumlin Road jail. So he had a lot of experience. We looked up to him. He's also a very strong character as well. Very dominant and what you would call sort of like a hard man, but very sentimental, very tough. I suppose a real tough man, wouldn't give in. And he was great to be with, absolutely brilliant to be with, because you sort of took strength from him. And he was very paternalistic as well, because he's always looking out for everybody else, especially when times were really, really tough. When the heads were going down with some people, he'd be checking in on them, making sure, is everything okay? And then coming out with the dark humour, which he was good at, sometimes really cutting as well, just to get you up and get you at it again and get you laughing and get you smiling and even get you slagging or bantering, whatever, to keep things going. And he was a bundle of energy. He never stopped. He always wanted something taking place in the wing. He hated silence. There had to be something, and it wouldn't matter even if it was some silly book that had been told 20 times, which a particular person did who always picked on. You were fed up. He had to have something going on in the wing all the time to keep the crack going, or just to have noise. And he loved getting up to the window and having a bit of crack as well. And he's a great sonic. He had all sorts of stories, brilliant stories. Probably half of them weren't true, but he was great to listen to. Great to listen to. Well, even worse than columns, if that's possible. But Yeah, I mean, I always tell this story, but I'll never forget this one. We're in between the hunger strikes. The first one hadn't went the way we had hoped it would have went. And by the way, she's just on a quick one on that. I know you're aware of this, but it was mentioned that the first hunger strike, they perceived that as, we'll go to the wire, but we're not going beyond the wire. Sean McCann was intent on going through the hunger strike. Sean McCann was wheeled out off the blocks. He was in a coma, basically dead. As far as I know, he went to the RVH and they revived him, and then they wheeled him into Musgrave, into the military wing. And one of my friends, who was also on the blanket, he was in because he had bust ulcer or something at the time, Tom Holland. A doctor came in to Tom and said to him, "You're a blanket man, aren't you?" And he said, "Yes. Will you please go out and tell Sean McCann that the hunger strike is over, because he's refusing all medical attention, he won't take any food." Tom had to go out and say to him it's over, because Sean McCann was intent on carrying right through to the end, and he never ever got over it. And he chased after the dark. I'm not even going into that, but he chased after the dark several times and said to the dark, "Why did you not let me die?" And in the end up, Sean McCann took his life on the anniversary of the hunger strike. So Sean McCann was prepared to go the whole way. And I remember him quizzing Leo Green and Tom McPhillian and others who were with him that time, and asked him, "What happened? Why was I taken off the hunger strike?" Because he certainly never said it. So I always want to make that clear. Sean McCann basically died and was prepared to die. So, we're between the hunger strikes. It didn't go the way we wanted it to go. There was plenty of opportunities, as we've already mentioned, for them to resolve the situation. Had they give us the clothes, that would have resolved it. And even at Christmas, it was Christmas Eve, I think, Father Toner, came in, and he said, "There's going to be an agreement that they have decided that we would come off on the sick, and that would be accepted because we've been locked up for 4 years and getting no exercise and so on, being starved and all the rest. We would come off for that. We wouldn't wear the prison gear. We would just wear the supplies with pajamas. And then we would get out for Christmas, and you would get the parcels and so on and so on." And then what happens then, the next day they come in to move us, and the way that they do it is to come around, there's cards sitting outside the cell with your name and your sentence on it. They collect them cards, they go around collecting them cards, and they go to the clean wing, and they put the cards in there ready for the shift. So they told us, "Now you're going into the clean wing, you've not to smash it up," and we agreed we would do all this. So over the Christmas period, it was agreed that that would be settled, and then negotiations would go on. So brilliant, we were looking forward to this. They come in the morning and did the usual, took the cards out. But then it went quiet. The screws went out of the wing, and we're waiting about 10, 15 minutes, maybe half an hour even, and the screws come back in, and they put the cards back in again. And then we later found out, they just said, "No, it's not happening." And we realised, if they couldn't give us that, if they couldn't concede, well, it wasn't a concession actually, if they couldn't agree to that, there's not a chance of them giving in. They actually thought they had us beat. They actually thought we had played our last card, and they actually thought then we're going nowhere. And they couldn't understand the strength of the feeling within the blocks. And I actually don't think even outside could understand the strength of the feeling in the blocks, because they could understand the first hunger strike didn't go the way it went, and they're probably saying, "There's no way, we want to go down that again, because we don't know the strength of commitment within the blocks." But it was strong, and we were really, really angry. And we're really, really angry at the way Bobby was treated. Bobby Sands was doing a negotiation, and he was basically told, "Just get something and get it over with." Right? And he had to go to Governor Hilditch and do negotiations. At the start, everything was fine because he was being moved up, he was being ferried about the blocks, recognised as OC, going in talking to the OCs, recognising their structure. But then it changed. And Hilditch said to him, "If you want to come and see me, you put your name down and you wear the prison gear." And we were fuming, and we were saying, why are we going through all this? And we were also asked to present ourselves for education work and doing work in the wings, maintenance. We're waiting in clothes come in. We were absolutely fuming that we were being put through this. I understand why we were put through it, because the same things that I said, because we knew the hunger strike was looming, and we do everything we can to try and avoid that, as long as we're not wearing that gear and doing work. We did everything we can. So it didn't work out, and thankfully then, we were one of the experimental wings, were put into a clean wing, and there was furniture and so on. And then thankfully that night, word came in, smash the place up, right? We're not getting involved in these negotiations anymore. It's going to be a hunger strike, we're going for it. And it was absolutely brilliant, smashing that place up. Fantastic, you know, because you're saying, yes, we're back at it again, you know. Who do they think we are? They think we were actually beat here. You must be joking. So we smashed the place up. And it was great, it was exhilarating. And then when you smash the place up, and then the other wing shouting, the rat squad's in, then it changed. All the excitement and the adrenaline that was going, it was just dropped. And you knew you were going to get a hiding. And the shift is from one wing to the other. It was actually, I think it's H3 was the film. If you see them, the screws are in the circle. And they have the buttons, and they have the shields, and they're banging the shields. And then there's the lads are running through the gauntlet, they're getting tore into you. That was it. That's exactly what it was. We were trailed across from one wing to the other, and hitting us with buttons and kicking us and all the rest. And then we're thrown into cells, you know, there was no windows, and still all waterlogged because they were cleaning it. And they left us there all night. And don't forget, this January, freezing. And you had to keep walking because it was so cold, you had to keep walking, and you were totally exhausted. And of course, you were beat up coming across the circle. And thank God, I thought morning was never going to come. And in the morning, happy days. I was never so glad to see screws coming into your wing. Right? And they threw us in the mattresses and a blanket. Only had them. And next thing, the doors opened again, and they were shifting us again. They were shifting us up to H6. And we got up to H6, and we got really battered again. I think the screws in H6 were trying to, you know, prove that they were even tougher than the screws in H5. And I was totally wrecked. So they threw us into a cell. Again, empty cells, no mattresses, no nothing. Totally exhausted. I remember just lying in the corner, feeling really sorry for myself and just beat out. And cellmate was the exact same. And I say everybody was the exact same, totally and utterly done. And then I'll always remember Joe McDonnell, because he never shuts up. And he got up, he shouted across the other wing. Bobby stands there with the other ones. They were in the wing facing us. He shouted over to the other wing. And he shouted out, he said, you know, lads, there's going to be bad days for these good ones. And the place just erupted. And it just lifted you when you needed it most. You know, when you're really down and you were feeling sorry for yourself because you got such a battering. And that just summed him up. He just never lay down. And he was so optimistic about the future as well. It was never a case of not getting it, it's when we're getting the political status. He had it all organised. We had a wee click going. We're going to get the parcels organised on the different days. You're going to be doing the woodwork. You're going to be, of course, he was the leader. He always telling us all what to do. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Never stopped. And his family as well was another big factor. You know, he never gave over about his family. Greta and Bernadette and Joseph. And whenever he got letters, he had to share it. He just loved sharing it. And what he couldn't understand, that I just didn't have the same passion for his kids as he did, you know. You know, I can remember, you know, times it was really cold in the windows and he's calling you up the window because he got a letter and he wants to share it with you. And I go, it's freezing, right? You know, because you get the full blast of the wind in coming through. It's freezing. And McCann will say, let's get up to him, you know what he's like. And then, so we get up and you listen to him, you know, for the 15, 20 minutes and, you know, your conscience is clear. But he just loved it. He just loved it. Never stopped. And he didn't take visits. He refused to wear the prison gear at all. He would not take visits. And that must have been tough because he said he had Greta and the kids. And he always talked about, I'm going to see them again whenever I'm wearing my own clothes and we got political status. And that was always the way with him. And, well, what happened was, because he did taking visits, he had it all organised, all the couriers in the wing, to get him in what we call chapter X communications with small letters. He had all this going. He had like Raymond McCartney, myself, and a few others constantly. So he was getting a letter, you know, at least once a week, more than anybody else, right? You know, smuggled letters. And he knew more about the outside world than any of us, didn't he? Never took a visit, you know? He was something else because he always wanted scale and so on. But he was, as I said, he was great crack.
I mean, at the end, well, not at the end of your book, but towards the end of your book, when you're getting out, there's a really sad description of, you know, you thinking about Joe and that last night, you know, because he didn't get out, he didn't get wearing his own clothes in front of his kids, and he was part of the 10 men who died, and you know that in terms of the historical importance of 1981, as far as I'm concerned, is so huge. It's bigger than it's our 1916 for what it did to our community and the inspiration that came from those 10 men. So, Jackie, I believe I read that you're another grammar school boy.
St Mary's, big difference.
What, between St Mary's and St Malachy's?
Oh,
why?
yeah. Well, St Mary's, as it is today, is more of a working class school. You know, St Malachy's was
Still dodgy.
a wee bit dodgy, yeah. Yeah. I think St Malachy's, a lot of ones in St Malachy's would have been SDLP or Alliance Party.
Vic was Vic and shaky. Yeah, well, there you go. Jackie's right. So, Jackie, your house in Andersonstown was already targeted by the Brits in 1971 when they arrested your brother Michael and interned him. And then in 73, I think I read that you decided to join the Fianna. You were
No, I was in the Fianna in 71. Michael was interned in 71, along with a guy from round the corner from us, Jackie Crawford, whose sister's up the back at the minute. Bunter Crawford's brother.
his father was assassinated.
His father was assassinated, yeah. So he was interned in 71. House, like thousands of houses in these areas, had been raided, loads. Door kicked in, kids dragged out of bed. So, as you know yourself, Danny, the whole shebang was up in the air. But one of the things, listening to the two lads here, one of the things that struck me is 99% of the people who were in jail with us were working class. You know, I think that's something that is rarely mentioned. They were all from the Lower Falls, the New Lodge, Andytown, Lanadown. It was all working class, you know. So, I'm talking about 50. I would say 50% of the prisoners in there were from Belfast. Vast majority of them were working class areas. Even
Poor
ones from the country.
Poor rural areas. Most
Were
all
from
of the
poor
all
rural
of the
areas.
action and all of the oppression. Took
So
place in
you're
poor
really
rural
talking
areas.
about the poorest people in the country who was involved in the struggle. Then, as you say, in 1976, cut it short, I was arrested.
But Michael gets out and is now rearrested.
That's right.
And he's sentenced to life, but he has political status.
That's right. That's right. He was up in the cages,
Yeah.
sentenced to life.
And then you're arrested.
I was arrested in 76 over in Finicky. There was a shooting attack, which I have never admitted. I got caught up in
Wisely.
it. And
We'll not tell
no. And I was the only one caught, literally, with a smoking gun beside me. We're driving away up towards Finicky Road South, and cops came down towards us. We ran out of the car, and I got caught. Everybody else got away. So that was May 1976. I was brought to the Crum, C Wing. It had been announced, the political status, that anybody caught after March 1976 wouldn't be getting political status. To be honest, none of us really had any idea of what that meant. So we went into C Wing, and then we found out what it meant. There was loyalists in the wing with us. Screws were under orders that they were in charge unlike the ones who had political status, they had their own command structure. So the OC of the wings dealt with the screws. Nobody else had any dealings with the screws, but the screws refused to recognise any structures. We didn't have an idea of what lay ahead. We didn't even know for a long time that they were built in these H-blocks. I think it was about August or something, we found out they built these new H-blocks up in Long Cache. I think it was about, then at that time I was in the cell with Teapot McMullan in the Crum and Ollie Comerford. Then they got moved up to H1 on remand, and I was in the cell then with Kieran Doherty and Mickey Holton from Turf Lodge. I'd known Kieran from outside. Kieran was the same primary school as me. He was about 6 months older than me, but 6 months is a big deal whenever you're that age. You know, you're a young teenager. He was in the Fianna, and I knew he was in the Fianna. But in the cell, Big Doc was the coolest guy in the world, right? He was a big, tall guy, well built, fit.
The screws were afraid of him.
Screws were afraid of him, but he was great to be in the cell with. Me, him, Mickey Holton, we had a good laugh, you know. One of the things I always remember about jail, you know, you go on that, I don't go on it, but that Blanket Man Facebook thing, right? And it's all, I found it all doom and gloom. But my memory of the blanket in that era was morale was sky high, you know. The other thing that I remember about was the determination. And I was thinking about this event. I'm thinking about the 10 lads who died in the hunger strike and what marked them out and how was it they were selected first. Because they were never, ever going to break. Never, you know. You just knew. And for me, Big Doc typified that, you know. That guy could never have been broken. Never. He was just, he was made of steel. Yeah. And it was the same thing applied to the rest of them. Kieran was the one who I knew best out of all of them. I knew all of them except for Kevin Lynch. I'd been in the cell, as I say, with Doc. I'd been in the wing with the rest of them. But that was a thing that was common to all of them. They were unbreakable, totally unbreakable, in my view.
Were you still in contact with Kieran in the latter days of 1981 during his hunger strike? Were you in contact with him when he was elected TD, for example?
No, because was he not in the hospital when he was elected TD?
June 1981? I don't think so. I thought he was still in the wing, but maybe, you may be right.
But he was in H4. Kieran was in H4. I was in H5 at that time. But I did see him. Because he had an appeal in. One of our tactics was if you had an appeal in, you got to visit every day. That meant greater communication with outside. You know, you're able to smuggle tractoracks or messages outside, get messages back in. You know, so it was a vital line of communication. Kieran was on appeal, so the way it worked. The VOM would have went into H3 first, picked up the appeal visits, then into H4, and then they come into H5. So at a certain point, I was in, I think it was cell 2 in H5, which meant it was close to the door. So when the minibus pulled in, you know, you had to see no ones who were going out on appeal visits. Kieran was one of them, and a wee bit of back and forth with him a few times. I knew by that stage that he was in the Irish big time. You know, he was just eating it up, as a lot of us was. But so he was always like he was full of life. He was full of energy. And then when he went on hunger strike, Pickles, who was having Kieran were like two sidekicks. He got moved into the cell with me. And after he went to the prison hospital, I didn't see him again. But you were getting feedback, you know, you were getting reports down from the hospital about how they were doing and all that.
And I mean, you also had the crystal sets, Mrs. Dales.
Yeah.
Is that how you learnt about his death?
Yeah, I had the radio on our wing. I heard Sheila, I think it was, or Mary talking about it earlier. It was like, you know, the wee brown, you've probably seen it yourself, wee brown tablet containers.
Everything fitted inside it. Earpiece, Ariel. Yeah.
And as I said, you only took it out at night. Now, sometimes whenever the screws went for their lunch, you would have had it out. Especially during the hunger strike, you know, you would have been tuned into it a lot more than usual. You know, you're aware any news whatsoever.
In fact, you were told if you heard that Bobby won for Man of South Tyrone, not to cheer in case the screws.
That was unbelievable. Our wing just erupted whenever that came through, you know. The screws still came in after lunch and says, he lost the election. Right? Wait, fuck it. Dead on. Yeah. It was so good.
So you joined the hunger strike, I think it was 3 days. Well, it was after Thomas McElwee's death and 3 days before Mickey Devine died, who was the last to die. That was the 20th of August, although you weren't to know that he was the last to die. I think you were in 44 days on hunger strike?
In 48. That's a couple of things you've got wrong.
So 48 days on hunger strike, and at that stage, of course, the hunger strike was being undermined by the intervention of Father Fall.
Yeah.
Its potency was just sapping away, and you were on hunger strike, I think, on the 3rd of October.
Yeah.
Pat Sheehan at that stage was a few days in front of you. How did you feel about calling the hunger strike off? Because Mary Doyle was saying earlier about the fact that they couldn't go on a second hunger strike, they didn't have the strength, they were faced with innumerable family and problems and, you know, conscience stricken about not being able to support the men in the blocks. When it came to an end, how did you feel?
It was mad, you know, because on the one hand, you're filled with I don't want to say anger, you know, but I remember whenever Bobby died, it was unbelievable, you know, anger and animosity towards the Screws, towards the Brits, but always, and I think there's always within the blacks, right? I always remember too the fucking fierce determination of everybody. Everybody there was deeply part of that project, deeply behind it, you know. It was unbelievable. The solidarity amongst everybody was unbelievable. You've never seen anything like it, you know. It was, you know, when the people united will never be defeated. Would never have been defeated. You know?
I mean, Thatcher had described the hunger strike as the IRA's last card. I mean, what do you think the legacy of 81, in fact, the whole prison protest, Armagh and the H blocks, I mean, what do you think the legacy of it is today in 2024?
Well, you know, we talk about the blacks in Armagh, but even outside, you know, it galvanised the whole Republican community. You know, that couldn't be denied, and it had an opposite effect, I believe, on Unionists and Loyalists. I think it broke them, and the Brits, the Screws who hated us. Most of them did. They had a deep-seated hatred for us, and some of that's understandable, you know, because there were Screws getting shot outside. But I think they were broke. You know, they were just completely and totally deflated, you know, because they're looking, these are people who are prepared to fucking go without food to the death, you know. And they couldn't fathom it, you know. And still, like I've had meetings with loyalists over the years, no loyalist ex-prisoners, and that's still there with them. They have no understanding of how anybody could do that. You know, I suppose in the minute, it's something like, you know, Palestine. You know what's happening in Palestine. You know, that how do you defeat people who are prepared to go forward?
Okay, well, I'd like to give a big bull of bus to Colm, Jazz, and our last speaker there, who was fantastic. Thank you very much, Jackie. So,